If you guys want some coins for the new Fut Fantasy promo, please check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're very fast, they're very cheap, they're very reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself 5% off your order. This supports the channel greatly. So what's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, I've got some updated 4-2-3-1 custom tactics and player instructions for you, but just before we get into today's video, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop it a thumbs up, as that does really help me out with the YouTube search algorithm. Also subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you are notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside guys, let's get right into today's video. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics. For the defensive style, I like to have this on balance. This is so we have the greatest control over our defense, where we're able to press when we need to press and we're able to drop off and be that more conservative when we need to be. So it does give us the greater control, which is very important, especially against those higher end players. So I do very much suggest using balance, but if you feel more comfortable with the pressure tactics, that is also fine. Now for the defensive width, I currently have this on 45. The reason for this is we primarily want a narrow defensive width so we can cover those central areas, because this is where all the danger is, but at the same time we still have that natural coverage of the wings, so when somebody tries to go down the wings for one of those cutbacks for example, we're also able to reach out to those areas. Now it doesn't matter how high you up your width, people will still go for those cutbacks and they'll still probably get them off, so it is better to have that more narrow width so you're at least, you know, good centrally. Moving on to the depth guys, I have this on 65. This is so we can win the ball higher up the pitch, and then that will allow us to have the easier attacks, but at the same time we don't have that defensive line too high to the point where we're always getting through balled. So I found a really nice balance in having this on 65. If this is still a bit too high for you guys, you can lower this, that is also completely fine. Now moving on to build up play guys, I think balance is the way to go. This is because it is the most suited for all of the different types of FIFA 23 gameplay you may experience. This is whether it is fast gameplay, slow gameplay, fast but laggy gameplay. There's so many different types of gameplays. This will keep you suited for all of them, which is why I think it's super important to have balance. Something like fast build-up is very good when the gameplay is fast, but it very rarely is, so balance is usually the most consistent. Now moving on to chance creation guys, you have a couple of options here, but I suggest using direct passing. This is because it makes your attackers bunch up against the defenders, which allows for those isolation plays. It also gets the best movement out of your players, meaning you're going to be able to create those chances. Some people like to use forward runs, and this is absolutely fine if you feel more comfortable with it, but what I think about forward runs is I feel like it's more risky than direct passing, and you also create less chances. But what some people like is your attackers push even further into your opponent's half, and it's easier for those to create chances. So it's up to you, but I do suggest using direct passing. Now moving on to the attacking width guys, I currently have this on 49. This is just one below 50, so it's still slightly more narrow than wide, if that makes sense, but at the same time we still keep a relatively narrow approach, as well as it also being wide, if that makes sense. So the 4-2-3-1 is quite a balanced formation like that. It can be narrow and wide at the same time, which makes it super unique and always super consistent to use. So I have the width on 49, so our players aren't too close together, but at the same time they're not drifting too far apart, so 49's been really good for me. Now moving on to players in box, I have this on 6. This is so I can get players into the box to create chances of course, but at the same time we don't overcommit our entire team to the point where we get counter-attacked, so 6 has been really balanced for me. Now moving on to corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1 because I have a corner kick routine that I use, which you guys can check out in the top right hand corner of the screen if you like, which requires me to have these both on 1. Now for the players you want to use guys, in the striker position I suggest using a more well-rounded striker. This is because it's a one striker formation and you have to compensate for the fact that there is one striker instead of 2. So the reason a lot of people don't get on with the 4-2-3-1 is because they struggle to find that balanced striker. They'll try and use somebody like Erling Haaland and it's not going to go too well because he's a one-dimensional player and you need a flexible player in the striker position in the 4-2-3-1. So go for a nice well-rounded player if you can, somebody that can finish, dribble, pass, you know, the 5-star weak foot if you can get it. Just go for a nice well-rounded striker. striker. Now moving on to the central cam, you're going to want to use a nice technical player, somebody that is agile, somebody that has good passing ability, good shooting ability, good dribbling ability, and obviously a bit of pace. You're not going to want an absolute truck in this position because you're going to find it very difficult to turn and navigate to create those attacks. So make sure you use a very good cam and one that works for you. Now moving on to the wide cams, you're going to want to use winger style players. These are players that are quick, players that have the good skill moves, players that have the good dribbling ability, the good crossing ability, the good shooting ability, basically just a very good winger style player. There's not really too much to say there. Now for the two CDMs, in the left CDM spot I use a more defensive minded CDM. This is somebody that's going to stay back and break up the play, and I'm using the Jorginho card. He's got a medium high work rate, which is super beneficial because he's going to be more focused on his defensive work than his attacking work, but if you can't get the work rate, don't worry too much. For the right CDM, I like to use a more box to box style player. This is somebody with very well rounded stats, somebody that's going to be able to attack and defend for us, which is really going to help the transitions from the defense to the attack. So I'm using the flashback Paul Pogba. The ideal work rate for this position is a high work rate, but for example this Pogba is high medium and he still works fine. So work rates are something you should aim for, but if you can't get them, don't stress too much. Just make sure you're using the right type of player. Now moving on to the fullbacks, guys, I like to have a bit of a balance between the two, where I have Roberto Carlos at left back, who's a bit more attacking minded and is going to help us go forward a little bit, and then I have Cafu, who's a more defensive fullback, which is going to add he's going to make us a bit more solid at the back. So I like to have that dynamic where I have one attacking fullback and one defensive fullback. As for the centre backs and the goalkeeper, these just need to be as meta as you can get them. There's really not too much to say there. Now for the player instructions, guys, on the striker I have stay central and come back on defense. Now we have him on stay central because we don't want this player drifting off to the wide areas. He's our only striker, so we always need him to be in the central position, so he's always where we need him to be. We don't want him drifting off to the wing, daydreaming, so stay central, super important. And we also have him on come back on defense. This isn't a defensive move as such, it just means when we lose the ball, he's going to be a bit closer to the rest of the team. So when we do win the ball back, it's going to allow us to build up a bit more authentically because Keane is going to be more involved. If you have him on basic defensive support or even stay forward, sometimes he feels very disconnected from the rest of the team and it can be very difficult to get him involved. Now moving on to the cam, guys, the central cam, I actually just completely leave him alone. The reason I do this is because I don't really want to restrict this player all that much. I want him to be able to do a bit of everything. I want him to be balanced defensively, so I don't really touch this player. There's honestly not much to say about him. For the right cam and the left cam, I just have them both on get into the box for cross. The reason for this is if you don't have these players on get into the box for cross, they're sometimes a little bit conservative and they're a little bit like passengers when we get to the penalty area because they'll just sit and watch. So by putting them on get into the box for cross, it means they're going to make the transitional runs to get more involved in the attacks when we are around the penalty area. Doesn't mean you have to cross the ball to them, it just means they will make those runs. So get into the box for cross on both the left cam and the right cam. Now moving on to the left CDM, the more defensive player, we have stay back while attacking, cut passing lanes and cover centre. We have him on stay back because he's a more defensive player, so we don't need him to go forward. We have him on cut passing lanes, so he's always looking to break up the play, which will allow us to kickstart faster attacks and retain possession. And we also have him on cover centre, so he's covering those central areas, as we don't need him to cover the wide areas, as for example on this side we've already got Di Maria and Roberto Carlos, so we need him to cover those central areas. Now for the more box to box play, we have him on default settings because we want him to have that freedom to attack and defend. The only important instruction is that we have him on cover centre, so like Jorginho, he is covering the central areas because we don't need him to cover the wing. We've already got Jorginho and Cafu on this side, so it's important we have him to cover the central areas. Now moving on to the left back, guys, I currently use him on balanced attack and overlap. The reason I do this is to add even extra width to this formation because although it's wider than some narrow formations, it is still quite a narrow formation, so sometimes we need that wider option to give us a better passing option or allow us to become a bit more unpredictable in the attack. So balanced attack and overlap means this player is not going to hesitate to go forward and add the extra width to our attack. Now moving on to the right back, the more defensive fullback, I have stay back while attacking and overlap. We have him on stay back, so we always at least have 3 defenders at the back, so we're not going to be completely exposed at all times. And we have him on overlap because let's say I do trigger a run forward with him, it means he's going to make those overlapping runs to add the extra width. So I hope that makes sense, guys. As for the centre-backs and the goalkeeper, I just leave them on their default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-2-3-1. If you guys have enjoyed or found this useful, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you're notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.